Andy, there's so much to talk about, but I wanted to talk about the culture with you and the culture surrounding education and the debate that we're now having about opening the schools, if I can. You know, I had an 11-year-old visit me from out of state last week, and I don't wear a mask outside. I just don't, and he does. And he couldn't stop peppering me with questions about why I wasn't so fearful and so scared as to wear a mask all the time. He wanted to wear it inside the house, too. What we are doing to these kids, this instantiation of fear into them and putting panic into them, could be darn near irreversible. I blame a lot of what we're being told. I blame this notion about how we can't reopen schools. The superintendent of public instruction in Arizona released guidelines today. I had to read them pretty fast because they came to me right as I was about to go on air, Andy, and it talks about community spread and the conditions of lowering the community spread before schools can reopen. It had no distinction or discrimination among age. So it's lumping 8-year-olds with, or 11-year-olds, if you will, with 70-year-olds in the aggregate numbers to look at the reductions in community spread before we can reopen the schools. This is insanity. This is nonsense.
Well, Seth, it is. I mean, there's so much to unpack in what you just said because the data, they don't disaggregate the data, so you can't contextualize it, so you can't really make informed decisions or choices. But when people like you, me, and many scientists and many doctors disaggregate it, when you start pulling it apart and you can say, well, this group has very little risk, and they don't spread it, then all of a sudden you can start putting some context on it. So they've not done us no favors with that. The second aspect of it is a lot of this is just arbitrary. If you would have been at the press conference, you might have asked something that, like I might have asked, why is 5% the magic number?
Right.
Or why is
right.
100 and 100,000? Why is that the magic number? Where is the science that supports that? We've seen at least one truthful situation where in Miami, Florida, the mayor shut down gyms. The gym owners went to them and said, can you at least show us the data why gyms should be shut down? He came back soon after. They said, well, we don't have any data. You're right. We're going to open it back up because there was nothing to support it. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing policymakers make decisions on data that's not really it's informative, but it's not. It doesn't give you all the answers. It doesn't give you some context to everything, so you can make a really truly informed decision. And then you have this notion of what you said, which is you are acculturating our society to panic and fear. And you know what that does, Seth? That lays the groundwork to take away freedom. It lays the groundwork to take away people's freedom and arrogate power to government. And that is really dangerous this time.
Meanwhile, we're told, follow the science. Okay, you talked about disaggregating data. You're right. They don't make it easy for us to disaggregate the data, but when we do and spend a little time on it, we find something really very, very interesting. I was actually overstating the numbers because I was including people under the age of 1. So I think I can take those people out because they're not going to be in our schools. We don't have 1-year-olds in our elementary and secondary schools. So if I use the CDC breakdown of numbers of 30 children under the 14 years aged or younger, between the ages of 1 and 14, 30 children who have succumbed, sadly, to the coronavirus. At the same time, we have had 3 times that number succumb, sadly, to the flu. And every year, we have hundreds children die from the flu. We have never had this debate about schools being closed due to the flu. We have the American Association of Pediatrics, the official journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics, not Association, Academy, American Academy of Pediatrics, comes out with an article just this month, telling us that it is a surprising but true aspect of this pandemic that children do not become affected the way adults do, and when they do, their symptoms are mostly mild, nor do they transmit it the way adults do. And yet we have teachers marching and protesting as if this is Ronald Reagan putting Pershing II missiles in Europe, in skeletons, with body bags. I mean, my God, Andy, what has happened to us?
Well, I mean, a lot of this is done for political purposes, and quite frankly, I don't understand all of it, because you look. So you were making some distinctions, and they're the right distinctions to make. Under age 14, under age 18, and then you move from the 20 to 44 category. And in Arizona, half the new positive detections of COVID are in that age group. But then you need to then look at what is the case fatality rate.
Right. The cases mean nothing to me. Right. Cases mean nothing to me. Nothing.
That's right. You have to look at that case fatality rate. And when you look at it, you say it's a fraction of a percent. And when you start...
4/100ths of a percent to be precise. 4/100ths of a percent.
And then you start moving and say, well, where then are people succumbing? Where's the case fatality rate coming from? And sadly, it is people aged 55 and older.
Right.
And so what your point early on was, by not disaggregating. Just by the way, that's about 85% of all our fatalities in Arizona are aged 55 and above.
Right.
So when you start looking at it, you say, we're going to shut down schools where most of the teachers and administrators are in the healthiest category, 20 to 44 of adults, and the children. These are the two safest demographic groups that you can have. And we're instead going to say, we're not going to let you have in-person classes. And there are a whole host of risks and pathologies, which is also what the American Academy of Pediatricians talked about. They talked about the problems that happen when they're not in school.
You bet.
And they don't even address the deterioration or the what happens with you educationally, how you fall further behind.
Yep.
They don't discuss that. So there's a whole host of risks, and we need to just basically take a step back and say, what are the risks of opening schools? And the guidelines that they put out today, they're arbitrary. There's no data or science that supports any of that. And what happens is they're going to say, but these are just guidelines. Fair enough. But what we have seen here is by putting out a guideline, you now create a liability threshold.
You bet.
And that's why schools are going to say, well, we can't open because we haven't met that threshold in the Maricopa County or Yavapai or wherever else it may be.
Right.
And they're going to say, we run the risk of liability if something tragic happens.
Right. We have given permission. We have given permission and an excuse to maintain shutdown and lockdown. You're in a profession, as I am, Andy, for better or worse, I think better, in both cases, where we get to hear a lot from constituents. We get to hear a lot from people on the ground. Not everyone gets to hear good, bad, and ugly all the time, as people like you do, or perhaps I do. And I will tell you, I will tell you what I'm hearing from parents, and I would love to know if you're hearing the same thing. But they were calling me and emailing me and texting me yesterday en masse, waiting for these guidelines, waiting for some answer as to what will be with their children in schools, and then telling us it's not as if this happened yesterday. Supposedly they've had 5 months to work on this. 5 months.
Yeah. Seth, so I just interviewed two East Valley moms who are really trying to rev up this charge, Laura Crandall and Becca Clarkson. They're really going forward here, trying to get the schools open. One of them was a former school teacher. And the reality is, in the Gilbert Unified District, it's been reported, they sent out a survey, right? The results were 89% of parents said, we want in-person school to open up.
You bet.
And teachers, almost the same amount, said we want to open up. And yet they didn't open up. The school district said, we're not going to open up. This is, and so all I can figure is they're concerned about liability, and what the administration did here in the state today is they gave a benchmark for liability.